Okay, let's go ahead and get started then. Welcome to the April edition of the CaTS REDCap Hour. Today we'll be talking about randomization methodology and how to implement them in REDCap. Mouse is a little slow. Once again, just like last month, we are the same people that we were then. That's profound. My name is David Alexander. I'm the Core Director of Cyber Infrastructure Enhancement. With me, I have Daniel Lorio and Dr. Robbie Beyl. If you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to email redcap@lacats.org or talk via the chat session, and we'll pick up your questions there. This is the time each month when I ask for feedback. If you have any topics you'd like us to cover, this link, lacats.org/redcapfeedback, will take you to a REDCap survey where you can give us your thoughts on things you'd like us to cover. Nothing's too big or too small. We'd love to hear your feedback. Today, Robbie will be talking about randomization methodology, and then we'll hand it over to Daniel to show us how to use randomization within REDCap. So, without further ado, I'll hand the mouse over. Robbie.
All right. Well, thank you. And again, we're going to be talking about the methodology today. So we're going to go into a little bit of the statistics of randomization. So first, what is randomization? So basically, it's just assigning subjects that agree to be in a study into one or two groups. Now, again, we're not going to get into advanced design, crossovers, or anything like that. We're just always going to assume a very simple, you're either going to go into the treatment group or you're going to go into the control group. So that's what we're going to talk about, randomization with two groups. So why is it important to randomize? Well, we want our sample to be representative of the population we're trying to get information about. So generally we have the sample that comes in, and we assume that is representative of the population. But we're going to split this sample into two different groups, a treatment group and a control group. So we want both of these groups to, again, be representative of the overall population. And statistical theory states that if we have a large enough sample size, if you randomly select what group they go into, whether it's treatment or control, then both groups should represent the overall population we're trying to get at. This ensures that we're going to use valid statistical methods when we analyze the results. A couple ways you want to check for this is to look at those baseline characteristics, and hopefully this will eliminate any confounding. So we're going to talk about how to create the randomization scheme such that, let's say, half the people go into treatment and half the people go into control. So, as stated, the simplest randomization method is called simple randomization. So here, let's assume we have a total of N subjects, and we have G groups. And then we're going to divide them however we want into groups. So the example I've shown is we have unequal group assignments, and you can have that, where we're going to have 3 people getting treatment and 7 people getting controls. So sample size, you don't always have to have equal. You can have unbalanced samples, and we can still take care of that during randomization. So on the next page, we see 2 examples of lists. And this is what generally we're going to provide. We're going to create a list of assignments that people will receive. So using example 1, the first person that comes into the study will get treatment. Second person to control. Third, fourth, treatment, and so on. So we can read throughout the list. So that's a simple randomization. I don't have any caveats. I just randomly picked who got treatment and who got control. The only thing I adjusted for was I ensured that both treatment and control had 5 in this case. But again, we could set that to, you want twice as many treatments to control. We can do whatever we need. But there's no other conditions. Now, if we see example 2, here's another example of randomly assigning subjects to different treatments. But if you look here, we have the first 4 subjects all getting treatment, whereas the latter subjects all get control. Now, this may make a difference, or it may not. This may be something we want to consider. So let's say we're having rolling enrollment, where we enroll throughout the whole year. And then, again, this study takes a whole year to enroll. The treatment people, and this is a weight loss study, the treatment people get randomized at the beginning of the year, right around New Year, where they're very motivated to lose weight because it's New Year. And the control people get randomized later on in the year, because, again, that's just the nature of the rolling enrollment. So we could have a seasonal effect that may be there. So simple randomization is not usually my favorite because you can have this seasonal kind of bias we want to introduce. So that will lead into the next type of randomization called block randomization. And block randomization hopes to leave some of that what I'll call seasonal bias. So we have blocks of size K, and we'll get K can be, we get blocks of size 2, 4, 6, any number of groups. And basically what we do in this block randomization is pretend each block is a smaller study that needs to be balanced. So this works well when we have small to moderate. So go on to the next slide. You see the example on the left, we have blocks of size 2. So every 2 subjects, we should have balance between the number of treatments and controls. So after block 1, we have 1 treatment, 1 control. After block 2, we have 2 treatments and 2 controls. So forth and so on. So we see we had 6 blocks there in total. So the randomization scheme was created such that, again, we would have this balance throughout. Now we can change the size of these blocks. So you may want to, instead of considering blocks of size 2, consider 4. So if we look at the right-hand side, we see that now we only have 3 blocks instead of 6 blocks. And we don't always keep that balance immediately. So if you look at the third line, we immediately jump to 2 controls and 1 treatment. But by the time we finish that block, we have the 2 and 2. And at the end of that second block, it's 4 and 4. So this helps relieve some of that seasonal effect we may see. This is generally the most used randomization method. And again, we're just generating these sequences that Daniel will talk about later, how we want to enter them in REDCap. But it's how we control how many treatments go in, how many more do we want than the other as time progresses. The third type of randomization I wanted to go over is called stratified randomization.
Which is what we're going to be covering as well in REDCap. So.
Yeah. So stratified randomization involves a grouping variable. So I think an easy example of a grouping variable would be gender. Let's say you have a study that you are worried you're not going to get an equal number of males and females, or males and females may affect the response outcome. So we want to adjust for that. So stratifying basically is used to create multiple randomization sets. So let's take this next example I have. If we look, I have 12 subjects that are randomized. And then we say we have 6 treatments and 6 controls. Great. That's equal number of treatments and controls. That's what I wanted. However, gender may be an effect. So let me break that down by gender. Now on this next slide, you see that there are 4 males in the treatment group, but only 1 male in the control group. So this may create some imbalance, and we get the opposite imbalance. 5 females in the control and 2 females in the treatment. So if we were, again, looking at weight loss as our example, maybe the female's going to lose more, so we have more females in the control group. That's going to bias our results. And we don't want that. So This is an example where we would need stratified randomization. So instead of creating that one sheet that you see on the left right there, what we do for stratified is basically create two different sheets. A randomization scheme for males and a randomization scheme for females. So doing that, we keep balance between the males getting treatment of controls and the females getting treatment of controls. And within this, we can use block randomization or simple randomization. So again, taking that same list, or that same 12 people, if I had stratified randomization, I would have had 3 in every group. So now we have balance, and hopefully the gender effect will be adjusted for, so we don't have to worry about it in the analysis. Now the last type of randomization I want to talk about is not something we can necessarily do in REDCap, but we still want to talk about it. And this is called adaptive randomization, or bias culling. So what it's doing is it's going to adjust the probability of the going into the control group or the treatment group. And now again, while REDCap doesn't necessarily can do adaptive randomization on its own, I've used REDCap in the past to help get information used for adaptive randomization and then create the randomization scheme. This is more work for the statistician, because the previous examples with simple, with block, and with stratified randomization, I provide randomization sheets, and then the randomization process is done to the end of the study. With adaptive, the statistician needs to be constantly updated about what subjects are in what group. So let's take an example. So I'm going to talk, again, we're doing randomization. We have 6 subjects, and I have their starting weight. And let's, again, say this is a weight loss trial. I used block randomization and got the scheme on the left right there, and we can see their starting weights. We do have equal number of treatment and control, so that's good. But let's look at those weights. So if we take the average of those weights, we see the treatment group weighs much more than the control group. So this is not something that we necessarily want, so we ask ourselves, could we somehow adjust for this? Can we make this, could we have made them equal at baseline? Because that's all we want. We want equivalence at baseline. So if we did this through adaptive randomization, it works something like this. First, we get the first 2 people in there. So then we see an imbalance. We see the treatment group has a higher weight. So what it's going to do is, and again, this is something the statistician will do for you, but this is how it would work out. The next person comes in and has a low weight of 120. So they are more likely going to go into the treatment group because their weight is higher than the control group because they're overall smaller. So now this is going to push the scales closer to the weights being equal. So now we see, instead of having almost 100-point difference, we see it's 130 versus 180. So when the next person comes in at 180, again, they're going to be more likely to go in that control group. So again, we're pushing the scale so that the weights at baseline are equal. That's really dictating the probability. And again, we have to do this iteratively. This is not something we can create beforehand. This is something that the statistician, every time a new subject comes in, the statistician needs to be told the weight, so then they assign the randomization. So then, and then we get the last 2 in. So now, where we see almost no difference between starting weights. One group has 178 units, and the other group has 173 units. So using this adaptive method, we saw that we can ensure balance between baseline weights. And again, that's the goal of randomization. It's to create balance between these 2 groups. Using large samples, we can just do something like simple randomization. But when we have smaller sample sizes, again, 6, 20, even sample sizes of 50 can easily have imbalance. We want to use more of these adaptive techniques, or at least use stratified techniques. We could have done this example also with stratified randomization, saying if you're above 175 pounds, you go into one stratum. If you're below that, you go into another stratum. So the adaptive can work with stratified randomization, but stratified randomization has a higher likelihood of having the equal weights between the two groups at baseline. So overall, the points I just wanted to get across is for randomization, we definitely want to speak to a statistician. We want them to create that randomization scheme for you. How we implement that, Daniel's going to tell you more about that, but that scheme is going to be created by the statistician. We need to know the total number of subjects. Also, do you want balance between the treatment and control groups? Maybe we know that there's more variability in the treatment group, so we're going to do a sampling where we're going to get twice as many treatments as controls. That's something that, again, the randomization can handle, but we just need to know it beforehand. Generally, we almost always want to do block randomization over simple randomization. Block randomization helps reduce an overall seasonal bias, and it can be provided beforehand and given to Daniel's group to then have them randomize it through REDCap. So it poses almost no disadvantages. We also want to think about how the other variables we may have at baseline could affect the outcomes. So my example with weights, those may affect the outcome, so we want to adjust for that. And again, maybe gender will affect the outcomes. So if the simple rule of thumb would be, if you can take your variable you think if it's going to be of interest and break it into categories, maybe 2 categories, maybe 3 categories, such as gender or above or below a certain weight limit, then I would recommend stratified randomization. However, if we think it's going to be more continuous, like weight as a continuous response, so again, we want to make sure their weights are approximately equal, not in these groups. We want to use something more like adaptive randomization for continuous variables. So adaptive is harder on the statistician because, again, they have to always be made aware when new subjects come in, but it has a higher level of having the balance. So that's a very brief overview of the different methodologies to randomization. Is there any questions about that before I hand it off to Daniel?
I see questions coming in.
Okay, we'll wait and read them.
Oh, okay. I said no. No questions. So great. Well, thank you, Robbie. That was fantastic. And now we'll
All right.
hand it off to Daniel Lorio. Oh.
Okay, so we're going to cover the randomization module inside REDCap. Okay, so the randomization module allows researchers to utilize the process of assigning participants or subjects by chance rather than by choice into specific groups. It's typically used in clinical research and clinical trials and helps implement defined randomization within a REDCap project by allowing you to define randomization parameters and upload custom randomization tables, which Robbie just went over basically. REDCap, it is also important to remember that REDCap does not create the randomization table for you. It basically generates a table for you so that you can use and modify, and then most likely by Robbie or a statistician for analysts and modifications, and then upload it back into REDCap. All right, to enable the randomization module in REDCap, you'll go to the project setup page. You'll look for the option called Enable Optional Modules and Customization, and then there is a field in there that says Enable. You can click on that button next to the randomization module to enable the field. After clicking the Enable button, a new mode will pop up directly underneath that area. which would be called Setup a Randomization Modal. Sorry. To proceed, you can click on the button to set up randomization, and then we can go to the next steps where it will give you a list of steps to three main steps to accomplish, and it'll go to a lot of detail. But on the brief side, the first step would be to define your randomization module. The second step would be to download and create the template allocation table. And then the third step after you're done would be upload the allocation table back into REDCap. So the first step, this will give you basically 3 sub-steps. It's asking you if you're going to be using a stratified randomization, which in this example I've selected ethnicity and race as my two fields. After that, then it'll also ask you if you want to randomize by group or by site. So you could have a site from Florida or a site from Louisiana, and you can have that already set up in your data access groups, or you can actually select a field inside your project that may have different things. Maybe it might be like Bossier City or New Orleans or whatnot. And you can use that multiple choice option. And the third one, step C, is to choose your randomization field. So this would be the control versus, what was the other one? Control, non-control groups?
Treatment and control.
Treatment and control groups that Robbie mentioned earlier. So something like that. And that would be step 1. After you're done, save it. And then for step 2 would be to basically customize and download an allocation table. There are 3 templates that are provided by and kind of auto-generated by REDCap, which are basically listed at the bottom of that modal. Example 1, which would be basic one. Example number 2 would be all possible solutions or possible combinations. And example 3 would be 5 times all possible combinations. You can use those 3 templates, and then which are all comma separated values, and you can open and edit in Microsoft Excel. But this would be where Robbie or a statistician would come into play.
Yeah, so what you do is once you create those, you would then email that to myself or another statistician, and then either we can upload it ourselves if you want to remain blinded, or you would upload it if you know the blinding categories. Now, again, remember, take that into account that whoever can upload this will get to see what the order of randomization is. So they should probably be unblinded to the if it's a randomized clinical trial.
Correct. And just the values inside there, basically for, let's say, ethnicity, 1 is for Hispanic and maybe 2 is non-Hispanic. So those values coordinate to one of the fields inside your REDCap database, which would be multiple choice. And then step number 3, which is basically what Robbie covered, you'd have 2 allocation tables to upload into REDCap. One would be for development status, and the other one would be for production status. Now, I did have a question that Robbie might be able to help me. Would those 2 be different if you're going to be, or would you be uploading the same?
So the development table should be just to test it out.
Okay.
So you would want to create a different randomization scheme because, again, the development table may be seen by people who are going to be blinded eventually, who are just trying to work out all the kinks in the system. However, the production table should be the truly one that only the people who are unblinded see. Okay. So that's generally the difference between the 2.
Okay, so blinded versus not blinded is where it plays a part. Okay, thank you, Robbie. So after you're done setting it up, you can view the dashboard, the randomization dashboard, which will show you which records have been allocated into the randomization table. So I've already included one subject as the randomized, which is C001 as the allocated record, and he was assigned to two-week baseline, which I guess he'll start earlier than the rest of the subjects. And then the other 2 areas I used were, and this is based on gender and ethnicity randomization, I guess.
Correct.
So randomizing a record. So this is done on the data entry screen on a field that you assigned it to, and you pick this field when you're actually setting up the randomization. So this would be a multiple choice, but you don't see that until REDCap actually randomizes it. So to view this field, the user will have to have appropriate user right permissions. So that's going to be discussed a little later. But this is what it looks like. This is what the data entry clerk will see, which group was a participant randomized to. You'll click the randomize, and then we'll continue with that. Modal screen will pop up, so you can see that under number 1, modal pop-up. It'll ask you to verify the 2 fields that it were based off of. So we chose gender and ethnicity as the 2 options. If one of them was blank, it would say you would need to actually make sure you enter that, assign a value, I should say. After you are done verifying that those are the correct values, what I mean, you want to verify, you want to make sure that those are right, because after you click randomize, those values will be locked. You're not going to be able to edit it. So once you click randomize, another pop-up will show you where they were randomized to. So on the screen to the right, on randomizing subject ID C002, it notifies you that it was assigned to the 4-week baseline. And then if you click close, if you go up a little bit, you'll see that it's kind of hard to tell, but I guess it's a little grayed out, so you're not able to actually change that answer. So they're stuck with that. So going back to the randomization dashboard, the new subject can be seen as allocated as C002 as the 4-week baseline. All right, so this is how you can set up your user rights for the randomization. You'll go into the user rights page, and then you'll see a subsection called randomization. This is only after you enable it for your project, though. You need to enable project, which was discussed on one of the first slides, and then you can see this in the user rights page. So basically, the setup will be it allows the user to define and randomize, define the randomization, and also upload the custom allocation table. The dashboard allows the user to view the randomization dashboard, and then the randomize is basically allowing whoever's doing the randomization to enable to be pressing the button to randomize the subject or the record. I guess that was it. Any questions?
I have a question, and it might be fairly simple for you, but that showed pressing this randomization button as an action that the admin or
whoever's assigned to it, yeah,
would do that. Is it possible to have that occur within a survey, like automatically randomize someone upon submission of a survey, or would you submit
I don't
the
believe
record
so.
and then
the record, it would be after the fact, after you get the data, from what I believe.
Yeah, so generally what these would be you have to come in for a baseline visit, and then at the end of baseline, someone has to click randomize because they want to check everything to make sure. So that's how we do it even without REDCap most of the time. We verify that they're getting the correct information and only randomize them after you get all the information for that baseline visit. That's pretty common.
That makes sense. Okay. Well, great. Well, I just want to I saw someone had dialed in and fallen off, but I just wanted to see if anyone else watching live had any questions. And I don't see any right now. So if you think of a question later that you'd like us to answer, please email redcap@thecats.org, and we can pass those on to Robbie and Daniel. Let's see what else we have to wrap up. today. Again, I'll make a plug. If you have a chance to fill out our REDCap feedback survey at the link above, we'd love that. Just let us know what you'd like us to cover in the future, or give us feedback on today's presentation. Here's a link to our REDCap training resources. Those are the tutorials that ship with REDCap. And then if you'd like to try out, if you think REDCap might be right for you, but you don't have access to an instance, you can get a 1-week demo at this address, redcapdemo@vanpelt.edu, and that'll give you 7 days. Will allow you to just try it out, take it for a test drive, and see what you think. And that's it. So if there's no other questions, we will sign off for this month. This is April. We'll stay tuned, watch Twitter and the listserv for news about our next webinar. So, thank you, Robbie.
Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.